The following program is a UWTV classic.
From the University of Washington in Seattle, Upon Reflection.
Hello and welcome to Upon Reflection. I'm Marcia Alvar. In 1987, Wilma Mankiller became the first woman to be elected as leader of the Cherokee tribe. Ms. Magazine recognized her accomplishment by naming her Woman of the Year. As principal chief of the Cherokee people, Mankiller oversees both a multi-million-dollar corporation and an Indian nation of more than 160,000 members. In her autobiography, Mankiller, a Chief and Her People, she interweaves the story of her own remarkable life with the political, social, and cultural history of the Cherokee tribe. Welcome to Upon Reflection.
Happy to be here.
Your early years and your life now, both tied very much to land that's been part of your family for a very long time. But in the middle is a chapter that was written in a very different place, in very different circumstances. Tell me how your family came to move to San Francisco 1 month before your 11th birthday.
Well, I think it's important to know first that the federal government, ever since they started dealing with tribes, has had a feeling that they needed to, quote, solve the Indian problem, unquote. And so our move to California was part of a relocation program that managed by the Bureau of Indian Affairs that was designed to, quote, solve the Indian problem by mainstreaming American Indians. There were 11 children in my family, and we were farmers. We farmed for our own consumption and then farmed also for trade and to sell products as well. And there just wasn't enough food to go around, really. We lived in a community where there was no paved dirt road. We only had a dirt road, no paved road, no electricity or indoor plumbing or anything like that. And to the people from the Bureau of Indian Affairs, our community, which was a predominantly Cherokee community, should be broken up. And so they told my father that we should move to San Francisco as part of this program, and that we would have a better life there. And so we got on a train in our little town in Stillwell, Oklahoma, and ended up a few days later in the Tenderloin district, which is the red light district of San Francisco.
Very tough area.
Very tough area. And then later our permanent residence became Hunters Point, which is a housing project in San Francisco, so the Better Life ended up being a very rough housing project.
You talked about the cultural shock that you had moving from rural Oklahoma to the city. Why did the government think that somehow this was going to make some kind of difference in your lives? I mean, what was the thinking behind it? Wasn't this called the termination?
It was during the termination era, and what I think that what happened is that they didn't prepare tribal people at all. They just thought we would sort of somehow fall into the melting pot and everything would be okay. And as government policies go, I don't think that it's that unusual that it wasn't well thought out. But what happened is, for an 11-year-old girl, I ended up going to school with children that was like going to school with children from another planet. We'd never rode a bicycle, we'd never used roller skates, we'd never used a telephone. We'd never had indoor plumbing. All the things that the other kids did, their experiences were very different from ours.
You didn't in the book draw any kind of direct parallel between this policy in the 1950s, this latest idea for what to do with Indian people, with the Trail of Tears, which is probably the saddest and most tragic chapter in your people's history. But throughout the book, there is a cyclical kind of motion to the history of the Cherokee people, of achievement, and then the government comes up with a new idea for what to do with you, and then building back up and going down again.
Right. Well, I actually, when doing the book, I actually saw that sort of relationship between our individual lives, which have been somewhat like that, the lives of my family, and then the lives of the tribal members collectively. And so I think the story of the Cherokees is really a story about survival, about hope, and about tenacity. After every major upheaval, we've almost had to come together and reinvent ourselves again as a people and reinvent government again over and over and over again, and we've done that. And we've felt so strongly that we should have a sense of community and a sense of tribe, that no matter what happens to us, we've been able to bounce back, land on our feet, and rebuild a community.
I read a description of the story of your life as the story of a journey to leadership that went through two important places. One of them had to do with anger, and one had to do with introspection. Talk a bit about your political awakening and what it was like to be in San Francisco in the 60s.
Oh, it was an incredible experience to be in San Francisco in the 60s. Music was changing. There were young people coming from all over the United States to San Francisco who really were searching for a different life. And the free speech movement was going on at UC Berkeley. The civil rights movement had started. The women's movement was beginning to take shape. It was the anti-war activities were going on. It was an incredible, unbelievable place to be. And right in the middle of that, a group of Native students took over the Alcatraz Island, citing a provision of a treaty that said that unused federal land should return to Native people. And so I think all of us who were involved in the occupation of Alcatraz Island felt like we were people of our times by being involved. And that was a political watershed for me.
It was a big step for you. It
was a
really
huge
changed
step
your
for me.
life.
It changed my life dramatically. And then after that, because I think part of it was just being able to see people talk about publicly to the media about things that we had talked about among ourselves before, treaty issues, land rights issues, education, those kinds of things, the Bureau of Indian Affairs, and that whole thing we talked about among ourselves but never talked about to outsiders. And so when I saw students and Native American people standing up and talking to the international press about these issues, there was somehow liberating for me. And I changed politically after that.
You were a housewife, a mother at the time. Tell me what it was like the day that you decided to get on the boat in San Francisco's harbor and go out to that rock. What was it like? What did it feel like that day to take that step?
Well, I felt in a way that it was somewhat risky. I knew that it would be different. Going there, I made a conscious decision to leave my home and get involved even before going there. And I think going there really was like coming home and seeing people there. The group called itself the Indians of All Tribes. And there were meetings and discussions, and
there's always
children
meetings and discussions.
Yeah, that's right. Lots of meetings and lots of discussions. And sometimes ceremonies, and sometimes dancing, and sometimes arguing, and it was just a wonderful experience. But I think more than anything, it was like coming home, and I felt that I was where I should be. And I felt a very strong sense of purpose. And then after that, I got involved in the land rights issues with one of the California tribes, and it just sort of took off from that point.
If the politics of the 60s had to do with anger and awakening of who you were politically, talk about the next stop, introspection.
Well, I think that I've had all these, like my tribe, I've had all these periods in my life of major upheaval, and I think that the next step for me was going home and going back to Oklahoma. And when I went to graduate school in 1979, I started graduate school. I had a very terrible car accident, and my friend was actually driving one way and I was driving another way, and we ran into each other head on, and she was killed and I was almost killed. I didn't know that she was killed for several weeks later. I was still in the hospital. But during that period of time, my own near-death experience and then recovery, and my learning about my friend's death and coping with that, I changed dramatically. And I think I became more level, more focused, and less angry.
You talked about that experience. I mean, in some kind of odd way, it almost sounds wonderful.
It was wonderful. I think that this maybe sounds trite, but I think in losing an absolute fear of death, I have no fear of death whatsoever, and understanding that death was like being, I don't know how to explain it, it's like being bathed with love. It's the most incredible feeling I've ever had in my life. It's better than falling in love for the first time, or seeing your child right after your child is born, or whatever the great experiences in your life where dying was wonderful. And it's very seductive. It pulls you toward death. Once you're on the path toward dying, it's very, very seductive. And there was a kind of a little voice or something reminding me of my two daughters, which caused me to come home, or to stay with the world and not die. And I thought that I had done that myself, but I later found out that there was a nurse straddling me in the ambulance and pounding on me and doing all kinds of things to keep me from going. But whether it was her or me that made the decision to stay alive, had a profound effect on me. And now I don't fear death. And I think that I held on to that experience because I thought it was important. And out of that experience, I think I lost a fear of life by losing a fear of death.
It was a few years after that your involvement in the tribal politics of the Cherokee Nation, really the elected office holding part of your life, began. You say you came to it kind of in an unusual way, and you were very much a reluctant candidate. Why?
Well, I've always been kind of bookwormish and involved in helping professions, and I developed programs and have always been volunteered and given money and always been helping people, and I couldn't see myself making a transition from that kind of person to someone who was in a political position. In large tribes like our tribe, running for political office is like running for Congress or something, and I couldn't imagine going from this sort of bookwormish person who developed programs and worked on Indian rights issues to someone who had to go out and, I don't know, kiss babies or whatever. And so I didn't see myself in that role initially. And one of the things that had an effect on me after our former chief had asked me to run for election, and before I decided to do it, is I saw a family, a Cherokee family, living in a car, and they'd sort of set up housekeeping and had clothes out on the line, and literally had made a life for themselves in a car. And I saw another family living in a bus, and one of the skills that I had was housing development, and I thought that I should try to get in a position of the power to allocate resources to do something about that. So that had an impact on me.
It was really reshaping what you considered to be the role
That's exactly
of
right.
the politician.
That's exactly right.
When you ran for office, I think the phrase you used in the book is that you called that one of the real low points
It was
of
a
your
low
life.
point.
Why was it so hard?
I think because it was unexpected. I was very well liked because I did do all these programs to help people. I had recovered from this experience with the automobile accident and had been successful in community development. I had kind of a radical political background, and I thought that I would have to debate political issues. And what was unexpected is that the big issue became my being a female, and that shocked me. And people didn't want to talk about issues with me, and they didn't want to talk about the future of the tribe. They wanted to talk about the fact that they didn't think women should lead. And so it was a low point. It was very hurtful.
Wasn't one of your opponents a woman as well?
One of the opponents was a woman.
Did she get the same kind of reaction that you did? I mean, you had death threats. I think the most terrifying was the description of a phone call you got where all you heard was the bolt of a rifle being loaded.
Sure. I don't know whether she did or not. She got eliminated in the general election, and my opponent in the runoff election was a male, and I don't know whether she had the same sort of reaction that I did or not. I would imagine she had some of that. I think that until I got in a runoff, no one ever expected me to be in a position to actually win. They felt that the man would defeat both of us and we would be left out. And so I think they were very shocked by the fact that I had won the runoff and was headed toward winning the election.
If you look at the history of the Cherokee people, historically a matrilineal culture, again, it comes as a surprise that the idea that a woman would be the leader in a culture with this history would be resisted to such a degree.
Well, that's because we've lost so much over the years. The Cherokees, I think, began to accept the values of the society we saw around us, and unfortunately, one of those values was sexism. And so over a period of time, we had reached the point where women kept moving to a secondary role. And so by 1983, our own people were questioning whether a woman should lead, and were saying things like, well, if Wilma wins, we'll be the laughingstock of all the tribes because we'll have a woman in a leadership role and that sort of thing. And so I think that we'd forgotten about the time in history where there was balance between men and women, and the important decisions in the tribe were made by both women and men.
And if you chose to run again next year, which I guess you've decided you're not going to do, how different would the reaction be? How differently would Wilma Mankiller as politician be regarded?
Totally differently. I think you can look at it just from the numbers in the elections. In '83, I barely won the election. And in 1987, I won by about 56% of the vote. And in 1991, I won with 82% of the vote. And so you can see that over a period of time, people got more and more accustomed to me in the tribe.
And have more women followed you?
Oh, absolutely. I've appointed women to judgeships. I've appointed women to many other positions of importance in the tribe. And I honestly have not set out to say, well, I'm going to put women in these positions and those positions. I simply hired the best qualified people. In the case, both of our judges are women. They both were the most qualified people. Our chief of staff position is vacant right now, but that position was last held by a woman. Many other positions of importance in the tribe are now held by women.
We talked a bit ago about the cycles that individual lives and your people's lives have gone through. You've really pushed economic development for your people. Do you see that as some kind of insurance that somehow someone in Washington can get a new idea about how to deal with the Indian problem? That is the key to self-sufficiency?
I think it's one of the keys, but I also think it's very, very important for tribal people. I think economic development is a key in its totality, not just pure business development, but the development of infrastructure, healthcare, daycare, education. All those things are tied to the development of the economy of a community, and I think that all has to be developed together. But I also think that it's equally important for our survival as a people that we have a strong sense of self, of who we are, a sense of community, a sense of tribe, and a sense of culture.
You talk in the book about the duality of being a Cherokee person, of the history of the tribe, of being able to work with the rules of the larger culture, but a life that's very much your own. Lately, there's much more interest, it seems, in Native American life in general, in the symbols of Native American life, in spirituality, religion, love of environment, any number of things, to the point where some people even think the census figures are bigger because people want to say that they're Native American.
I think that's true.
Is that a good development? Bad development?
Well, one never knows. I remember a time in the 60s when so many people were enchanted with Eastern religions and Eastern cultures, and everybody lots of people were making treks to India and that sort of thing, reading all things Indian from India. And it was just a fad and it passed. Well, I wonder if we're in the same sort of period now where we have a lot of focus on Native nations in the U.S., and whether this will just pass or whether there's a genuine interest in learning about the true history of this country, which is the history of Native people, and also learning about our contemporary issues. I hope it's not just a sort of a passing interest, and then I'll say, well, we did Native Americans, let's do something else.
Move on to something
else.
That's
right, yeah.
It's a subject that has generated a certain amount of controversy among Indian people. I mean, there are some people who react very strongly in a negative way to this, saying, this is just another example of somebody coming in and wanting to take.
Yeah.
On the other hand, you could argue and say there may be good in it. Well,
I think it all depends on what happens. There are very negative aspects to the interest in Native culture and spirituality. There are lots of self-proclaimed medicine men who go around selling things and charging for so-called secrets of spirituality and that sort of thing. And I think that we're increasingly concerned, all of us, about these charlatans who just sort of dream that they're Cherokee or some member of another tribe, and then go around exploiting people. And so that is a real, very current issue among Native people.
There was a moment in your book that I loved it. I mean, it was a wonderful sentence. You were talking about the man who was the minister of a church in San Francisco at the time you lived there, Glide Memorial, which was a very political church. And you were musing about him, wonder whatever became of him, of Reverend Williams.
Right.
And you said you only hoped he hadn't become a moderate like so many of us have. And it felt like you were chafing just a little bit at the restrictions of being the chief of a people.
I think I was, because I wrote the book before I knew that I wasn't going to run again. And I think that I always tell people that when I started to sound like the people I used to protest against, I decided it was time to retire. And I mean that. I think that this position was what I should have been doing for this particular period of time. But I also have not changed so much that I don't see other roles for me. I don't think that you have to have a titled position to do good work. And I think that in this role, I'm the chief of all the people, whether they agree with me politically or not. So I've had to sort of move to the middle, because I truly believe that when you're in an elected position, you represent everyone, and not just your own personal beliefs. And I think that being out of the position will allow me to sort of return to who I am really.
And what will life be like when that day comes?
Well, the kind of work that I do in the tribe is work that I'll continue. I expect to do more work with my husband, who does rural development work, and I'm very interested in community development among tribal people. I truly believe that we have the best solutions to our own problems, and I'd like to continue to build on that. So that's the kind of work I'll do. I am taking a little break and going to Dartmouth for one semester to teach, just to get out of my life and my work and how I've lived my life for 25 years, and just reflect for a semester. But then I'll return to Oklahoma and continue on.
What are you going to be teaching?
Probably community development or contemporary tribal issues. It's really a very open kind of a semester there.
How wonderful. Give you time to put some distance and
yeah, if I can survive a quaint little eastern town, I'll be okay.
I'm sure you'll be able to do that. Well, what are the success stories that you'll use as you put together the syllabus for this course? I mean, what are the things that have happened that you're most proud of?
Well, I think the success stories nationally, many of the success stories are stories like ours, of a very tenacious people that have had to rebuild and revitalize their tribal governments and tribal communities over and over and over again. And so I think some of those stories will be told. I also think that even in a tribe as mixed and intermarried as our tribe, we still have our language, we still have ceremonies we've had since the beginning of time, we still have art forms and that sort of thing that we've held on to. And I think even in the most fragmented tribal communities in this country, there's still an attempt to hold on to tribal culture and also tribal traditions, and that's surviving. And more young people are interested in maintaining some sense of culture and history and community. And so those are the stories that I'll be talking about.
You also talk in the book about one of the difficulties that's posed in terms of the national awareness and national leadership is that there are so many distinct Indian cultures in the country. And you said something like African Americans could look to Martin Luther King. Mm-hmm. There was a leader, an extraordinary man, right, who galvanized an entire nation, white people, black people, all kinds of people. But that kind of leadership hasn't emerged for Indian people. And should it? Will it? Can it?
I think tribes are so diverse, from, say, the Northwest Coast to the Southwest and then into Oklahoma, that we'll never rally around a single leader.
No one may ever rally around
That's
a single
right.
leader.
What I'm seeing happen is that we continue to build coalitions and focus on the issues that we all agree on rather than the issues that we don't agree on. And I see more and more of that happening. Just in the years that I've been involved in tribal issues, I've seen more unity, more people coming together and saying, well, we may not agree on this issue, but this is an issue we all agree on, let's all work on that. And that's worked marvelously. And I think that it's more likely that there'll be teams of people who will collaborate on important issues rather than a single leader.
And who will tell the stories?
Well, I think that we still depend on older people and technology to be able to do that. I think that more and more young filmmakers and people who are interested in television, video, and film are using that technology to talk with older people and talk with people who have the stories and the oral tradition to preserve that for future generations. It's taken some time to, I think, get more traditional people to become accustomed to using film and video as a way of preserving stories and culture. That's happening.
I was curious about whether that might end up being an interest of yours. I mean, the Belle Project that you were involved in, CBS News did a story on that, and a lot of things happened as a result of that. So many of the projects that you're knowledgeable about, that you're involved with, have yet to really make it out beyond a certain circle of people. I mean, is that an interest you have? You've told your story to move on and to tell other stories.
I'm absolutely interested in telling the story of tribal people, but I'm really interested in everyday human interest stories about tribal people, because most of the people in the general culture only hear about tribal people if there's some huge controversy like gaming or some tax issue with the state or tobacco sales or something like that, and so they begin to define us by those issues. And I'm very interested in just telling everyday stories about people, about women and about families and elders, and getting those stories out to the general public. And I'm very interested in film.
We're rapidly running out of time here, but we talked about how to leave political office will be liberating in a sense. It'll give you more freedom to do some different things. But is there anything you're sorry to leave behind as your term comes to a close? Is there something you're going to miss?
Actually, there isn't. I think that I'm not necessarily a creature of habit, so I don't think I'm going to miss the treks to Washington or those things that have become part of my life. I don't feel any poignancy at all. I think it's time to move on. I don't think that elected leaders should own the jobs. I think that you should recognize when it's time to move on and there's a need for change, and I recognize that. I'm moving on. I have no regrets.
It's perfect time to do it.
Yeah.
Wilma Mankiller, I want to thank you so much for being a guest on Upon Reflection. I love the book, Wilma Mankiller, A Chief and Her People.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
To see more UWTV classics, visit uwtv.org/classics.